Hi.
Hi.
Hold
Let me
on.
get
We're gonna spin this around. We were just looking at your gorgeous painting while we waited for you. Oh boy. And now here's my face. How are you doing, Shannon? How are things in Nashville?
well, it's really rainy today. I can still get to my studio, which is great, and I feel so fortunate that that's the case. That my job hasn't stopped. Um, so I'm painting, which is great,
Totally.
except me.
It's funny. We've been saying to some of the artists that I've been in touch with, it's artists seem to be built for the apocalypse, right? Like,
I was just telling a friend of mine. I feel like the world. Let me turn this back around. I feel like the world just joined my club.
self,
So, the way to
exactly. Um,
go.
I'm having a little delay here, so let me take these headphones off and see if that helps. I thought that would make the sound clearer, but I think it's creating a weird delay. Hang on one second.
Okay. Um, um, can everyone there hear us? I don't know if anyone on the chat wants to jump in and say that we're all good here. I can hear you fine. Okay, cool. So Shannon, tell me, all of the paintings for our upcoming show, thankfully, are here, and thanks to the amazing shippers and art handlers that are still working. They got them here, and we are planning on installing your show, the Ever Flashing Strap, as scheduled. So next week, we're going to hang everything, and we'll be photographing everything. And at some point in the future, we'll be doing another walkthrough with you so that we can talk about that work. But it feels, for a lot of the folks on here who have been following you on Instagram and seeing all the great images from your shows in New York and LA, maybe you could speak to everyone a little bit about what it's been, this kind of crazy whirlwind, after having this period of what seems like hibernation in your practice. Well, not that I chose the hibernation necessarily, but I don't think artists generally plan this sort of thing where I had a show, and even my LA show, which is still up now, is going to overlap with yours, which I think is sort of I wouldn't say no or like a faux pas, but like something artists don't generally do. And maybe just simply because there isn't enough work to be able to do that really with artists. So I'm glad you brought up the hibernation, because I've had about, I don't know, 2 years before the first show in New York. Let me adjust this a little bit. When I just was producing painting after painting and not even really thinking necessarily towards a specific show. Just, I think after so long, they just were coming out of me like one after the next. And only when I got to about like the 20th painting, and I'd shown a handful of friends, were a couple of them like, are you going to show these? And at the time, because of how I had left New York and the art world and sort of, I don't know, the way I felt about the art world, I sort of disengaged, and I felt better sort of removing myself and just focusing on simple things in life. The thought of returning or showing, especially because I moved out of New York, I didn't think that was possible, you know? Little did I know Instagram would become my best friend, and you don't necessarily need to be in New York anymore. I mean, I think, when I was in New York and I would see other artists living in other places, I thought, oh, it's because they're established. They get to sort of, leave New York, or maybe. So I really didn't think it was in the cards, even if I wanted it. So yeah, I think after that many paintings and people asking me, or just commenting saying like, I really like these, I thought, you know what? Why don't I just call, or why don't I just call whoever I know and start, putting my little feelers out and see if anybody is interested. And not so much happened through that. I think, I had the right friends who had the right friends. But what's so funny is that a random person in an art fair approached this guy Francisco who has Love of Gallery, and this is someone I still don't know personally. And he went up to him in his booth and said, "You know who you should really be showing? Someone like this," and held up my Instagram. How random and flattering, and oh my god!
Yeah.
And Francisco agreed and contacted me and sort of started fanning me. I mean,
Amazing.
I know it's so beautiful, right? And since then, that little, I call him my little angel, whoever he is.
Yeah.
After I mentioned that in an interview, he said, "My mom showed me this," and said, "Aren't you the one who showed Francisco?" I thought, "Oh my god, this is such great kismet." And I think, I don't know, I feel like I like to say to my boyfriend, like, I feel like this is like when you have a crush on someone and you're putting all that energy toward that obsession and nothing happens, and then you kind of get over the crush, and then all of a sudden that person has a crush on you when you're done with it.
Yeah, totally.
That's like what's happening. I sort of stop wanting it, and then I get great response, which I'm
Totally. I'm going to back up a little bit for the folks that don't know exactly what the trajectory has been. So you were in New York, you know, we're very kind of immersed in the New York downtown scene, you know, making work and showing, and also just being surrounded by other creative people, musicians, artists, filmmakers, the like. And eventually that life just became too much for you. And so you returned back to your hometown of Nashville, which is also an amazing, incredible, creative place, but not exactly the epicenter of the visual art world, right? Um, and just kind of incubated this body of work, right? So essentially, you know, let's say 30-ish paintings. And then in very quick succession, had a solo show with Love Of, which is an incredible gallery in Chinatown in New York City. And it's run by Francisco, who's just wonderfully generous and an amazing guy. And then immediately after that, opened a solo show with Dave DeBoer in Los Angeles, that coincided with the great, you know, kind of LA, this sort of shift to the LA fairs and Felix and Freeze Los Angeles that luckily were able to happen before really the sort of like mass outpouring of this virus, whatever you want to call it.
yeah.
And our show, which we scheduled last fall, is going to be the third in that succession of exhibitions, right? So we're opening on April 3rd. And then now, as a result of these shows and the incredible response that you've received, which has included amazing press in the New Yorker, sort of all over, Cultured Magazine did a great interview. I won't kind of bore everyone with the list of all that press, but you know, if they Google you, they'll find it all. But now you have shows lined up in Europe. You're going to be in a group show in London. Am I allowed to say with?
Actually, the group show is going to be in Athens with
Okay.
a gallery soft opening, and that's probably just one painting, and then the next event will be in Paris. I don't know what scheduling is going to be. I don't think anyone does. Which is scheduled. It was scheduled for this fall in Paris, and then I will have a show in London the following spring.
Amazing. Amazing. And so I think you said something that is really pertinent to our current moment, you know, and just touching on, obviously we consider ourselves to be in great company with all of these galleries. Opening shows another artist that we've exhibited, Naveen Mahmood, you know, and we're all sort of part of the same family, which is, I think, an incredible thing that we're feeling right now. You know, everyone is doing these great Instagram live videos. We're all in touch digitally. And it does sort of go back to this idea that artists are built for the apocalypse, and that sort of in this moment more, and in crazy moments like this more than ever, our cultural community becomes not only more valuable, but sort of more, our ties become stronger. You said earlier that, you know, when you started making this body of work, and friends were sort of saying, Shannon, what, you know, what are you doing? Are you going to show these? Or what are you going to do with all these great paintings? You know, you had friends of friends and people who really advocated for you and kind of shared your work. So maybe we could talk about that for a little bit. And then afterwards, I kind of want to shift the focus
to the actual work, and talking about where your practice comes from and what you're thinking about.
Yeah. So where do I start? I think when friends started seeing my paint, I'm really lucky in that even just a handful of very close friends have also been my biggest fans throughout the years. And I don't, first of all, I'll just say my work is so different. That all this work that I'm showing consecutively, like you were saying, it's figurative and it's so different stylistically than anything I've ever done. I mean, I think in college I did sort of a realistic painting. Lisa Yuskavage, I don't know if you guys know who she was. She was my painting professor when I was in college. So
Amazing. I didn't know that.
yeah, I mean, I was what, 20 years old. So that was like over 20 years ago.
And I want to interject like a fun fact because we didn't, I'll tell everyone too. Shannon and I have not had the chance to have a proper studio visit because my trip to Nashville was canceled before all of this. And so we have actually shown in a group exhibition, but Lisa's husband, Matt Bay Levenstein, who's an incredible, also photorealistic painter.
That's her also in drawing.
Yeah.
So I knew both of them. I'm sorry, were you going to say something about Matt?
No, go ahead. I just wanted you to know that.
Yes, he was my professor, and in fact, I was also a nanny for another well-known artist, Sean Landers, who I had met through Lisa, and I was with them for years. And I went to one of his shows during this period when I stopped painting, and Lisa was there, and Matt Bay was there, and I remember Matt Bay. I'm really tooting my own horn sharing this, but it was really encouraging because I went there after having not made art for like a year and a half, and I was still in New York, and he said, Shannon, the drawings that you made in my class, he said, you're like the best drawing student I've ever had. I thought,
amazing.
Not only did he remember me, but this was like, I don't know, 17 years later. So I was just floored, and I thought, oh, how funny. I don't even draw. Like the art I was doing was like these word type paintings. I've got a couple over here. I just don't want to move the camera yet. But to go back to like my friends, so I during that period of time, my biggest fans, my best friends, and my mom, and mostly my friends who kind of speak my language, like you were saying, musicians or whatever. Those of us who kind of see the world in a similar way would always say things so lovingly, like, gosh, when are you going to make art? Like, you're the person that needs to be making art. I think artist sensibility is there no matter what. And for those of you who suffer with this burden, I call it, of being an artist, it can be a blessing, but it's such a burden because not painting was really painful for me, psychically, psychologically, emotionally. And I didn't realize it until it came back how much of my energy, uncomfortable energy is transmuted into the artwork that I do. So I'm so grateful it came back. But during those years, I think, friends would just say like, oh, you really need to make art. Like, what's going on? Maybe I would sort of, put it into like my style or into things I would be seeking out. And I don't regret the years of not making art because I really do think there's a time when like professors need to take what do they call it, sabbatical or something, Yeah. I think I did have to have those years to just process life for whatever reason and sort of become this new, I don't know, person.
Yeah.
Soaking things in and sort of working them out. But I don't know what else you wanted me to talk about.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit about, you talked about that this body of work that's sort of been parsed out through these 3 shows is quite varied. And our show, which feels so strange, obviously I think we're adding baggage of the current moment to everything. We can't look at a single thing without kind of, relating it to the way we feel and the things our world is going through at the moment. But, our show has a lot of bodies in it and a lot of nudity. And I think the particularly the sort of, you know, fraught or distressed female body is heavily present in our show in a way that maybe the two shows prior, it was more suggestive. I saw the video that you had at Francisco's. I was lucky enough to be able to actually see that show in person. And, you know, there was this great video of this woman kind of being punished with the strange haircut. So maybe you could talk to us about the source material for these paintings and how you gather that, how you decide what paintings go together. I thought it was really wonderful. You know, you mentioned this drawing text-based work that you were doing. I found out from a close friend that he has one of those works, and I've been looking at it for years in his home, not realizing it was yours. And
That's incredible.
but it doesn't feel, while aesthetically it's quite different than the current work, the idea of the narrative in that piece is strong, and he's a writer, so of course it makes sense that he would have that piece. But I think the narrative is so strong in all of your work, and I'm kind of curious to hear how you gather these images, you know, where they come from, and then also how you build this narrative, right? Like how you write the sentences. Because looking back at the past two shows, it's clear that there's sort of a story being developed, and I would just love to hear how that comes together for you.
Yeah. Without deflecting your question, I'm lucky that yesterday my partner and I were talking about this very thing, because I just ordered a book. Well, first I'll just say this. The narrative itself, I'm not creating in the way that if you and I were talking about, like you want me to answer that question, like what is the narrative? I can only answer that in the same way that like you could answer that, by looking at them and sort of taking them apart with that part of our brain that we're able to do that with, if that makes any sense. I think when I'm creating these paintings, I'm so visual and emotional. It's such a visceral experience for me to collect images and put them together. It's, people say this all the time, so I'm not the only one. It's like when it feels right is when it's a solid composition to me. And composition meaning like sometimes, I mean, we're all on the internet. When I'm gathering ideas or just going through like Tumblr or Instagram, whatever, I don't steal like some artist painting and use that image and just reproduce it. But I find so many images, film stills or whatnot on the internet, and then it will be like a backdrop for something that I add to that to create the kind of, you know, new image that sort of fits in my world, if that makes any sense. But the narrative itself is something I could ask any of these other friends that are watching, like, what do you think? Like, I'm so lucky, like you were saying, to have this press. And I get so thrilled to read what someone else has to say. And I still, like, I appreciate all of it, but there are a couple writers who really nailed something through words that I thought really spoke to me, like, oh, wow, they really get it, which is so exciting. But I probably wouldn't be able to write and describe the paintings as well as these people do, because writing's their forte, you know, like, nor do I want to be what I'm really good at. And I had to, you know, try to figure out a way to describe my art in applying for grants this past year. I was just like, this year was all about going for it. So I applied to a bunch of grants. I got one, which is so amazing.
Amazing.
But it was grueling, honestly, having to like describe in words. And to go what my partner and I were talking about, I had ordered this book by Julia Kristeva, who's a French philosopher who I love. And the title alone attracted me, obviously, because it's called The Powers of Horror, which of course applied to what, you know, what we're all dealing with right now. But someone said when I put that on my story, because I was so excited to get that book, he was like, oh, how appropriate, you know, meaning like to my art. And I thought, oh no, like, is this gonna, I mean, I really grappled with this yesterday when I was talking to my boyfriend. I was like, is it going to mess me up? Because already starting to read the book, I really relate to how she's talking about the abject and, you know, the violent. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to be able to be aware of a narrative. Is that somehow going to fuck up what I'm doing? You know, I had all these questions, and he was saying maybe they're not mutually exclusive, and I have yet to know that. So, but it sort of makes me scared of, because I do have this sort of, I don't mean to, you know, make it seem like I'm some kind of, what do they call it in the Grecian times? Like the spirits would talk, you know,
Yeah, come through you. Yeah.
or whatever. Like, but that the only way to describe it is this kind of spiritual, or, you know, I don't want to limit it to just saying like spiritual. It's that otherworldly sort of way of transmuting things. And thank God I found art at some point in my life.
Yeah.
That's my thing. But the narrative, you know, I can just say that obviously I'll just say simply, it's not so much the narrative I'm trying to express on purpose as much as an emotional experience. Like the same thing I'm feeling as I'm making it, I would like to share that feeling. And I think the feelings are generally ones that we don't really have the words for. You know, we can't easily describe them. So, you know, in I think German or Japan, I used to follow on Twitter this, like, I don't know, vocabulary or every day there was a new word, and each word was so complex, you know?
Yeah.
They described some really nuanced overlapping of emotions that I don't think English has, or if English does have words like that, we don't use them constantly. And I thought they were so beautiful and poetic. And I think the paintings I make, I try to get to those little crevices, those like in between places that seem so familiar, but we can't quite say with words like, what is that doing? You know, like what is that painting evoking? I'm not quite sure. You know, and maybe the story's not quite clear too, and I like that. I think that's a good place for art to sort of be, you know?
I
There you
that
go.
we had a little, my time limit for social media has been met today, but we're gonna set it aside and keep going. I think that it's true that of course we make objects, or you make objects. I just sell objects. You make these things because they don't fit in any other space, right? If they were language, they would be language. It would be a story or a poem. If it were film, it would be film, or a song, it would be a song, right? That they exist in the world in this particular way because they do embody a particular emotion that cannot be expressed any other way. And I think that, where your work sits so well is that we recognize um, something disconcerting in it. And I'm looking at, it's so wonderful to be able to look at this one painting while we have this conversation, because, you are, there is clearly a sense of the domestic, and clearly a sense of the way we feel the domestic inside our own minds, which is often very different from the way it's pictured. We thought a lot about the domestic space and are thinking about it a lot with Katie's show, and a lot of the artists that we deal with that deal with design, right? Because these tactile objects that we live with do inform that. And I think your work speaks so well to this sort of like tone that hangs in the air. I remember when we were looking for a house, we bought what's very old for South Florida. It's 100-year-old house. And my mom would say, yeah, it has such a great feeling. You could just feel that happy things have happened here. And I think often the opposite is true, or some strange in between. It's the reason why Parasite was such a great film, right? That like this kind of unspoken domestic tension was made palpable, and kind of readable for the viewer. So maybe you could show us, a little bit of what's going on in your studio now. It's kind of the reverse way to look at a show. We're going to see what you're working on after the show, and then next week we'll see the actual show.
All right. So So the most current work that I've started, and the reason it's green, I'll just say, since I started painting in this manner, honestly, I can't remember so much from, and I'll just say from Lisa's class, because she's the only person that really formally taught me how to paint. So I'm pulling a lot from that, but also I just, I'll look at YouTube to kind of get hints. Like when my paint combination will fail for some reason, like the oils or medium, I'll have to Google and figure out like what went wrong. And so it's a real hit or miss, and I'm still trying to find like a good, medium, just general oil painting techniques. Having said that, the green is just one way of doing a grisé, which is like an underpainting that the masters would use if there's any type of skin. It just allows for color to be more rich when you start layering it. And I don't know how well it's working for me, but I think it's a way for me to sort of, the way a break dancer like goes around in a circle. I think it's kind of how to get started on the painting. And it just feels more rich to me as I keep layering the oil paint. So right now that's drying before I can start painting like the flesh color on it. And just to say, subject-wise, this is going to be part of the show in Paris. And unlike the 3 shows, which were sort of picked, I don't know, less from, a thematic perspective, but more just from a big, I don't know, garbage dump of beautiful paintings. I think I've had to sort of create a narrative just to have like a theme for each of these shows. But this will be the first time I get to sort of plan towards a show. And it's interesting because my head is sort of getting in the way, like I was saying, but I want to be able to have those two coincide so I can kind of have a theme and kind of see what's coming out of me and what that's all about. And we'll see if I come up with a good, artist statement out of that or press release. It'll be interesting to see. So this is kind of my little box that I work in, but I stretch my own canvases as of now. I think as I start to paint larger, which I'm going to try to do soon, I may have someone help me, or I may have to get a new studio to do that. But I pretty much just paint, like, I call it friendly size. Wish I could stand next to it. I might in a second just to show the scale. But yeah, I'll just sort of, like, I had to wait for this to dry. I just starting another one, which is horrendous looking. It's the beginning. It's just like a sketch of what's to come.
I have to say about this one, the one that's up on the easel,
yes.
I love the reintroduction of the text. I like seeing the kind of marriage of a couple of these things that have come from throughout your career together.
Yeah. And, I actually have a deck of cards. I'm going to have to reprint them, but during those years, I wasn't totally doing nothing. I was also sort of fabricating things. And if I showed you around my studio, there's like I did a few pieces of design, like interior design. There's a staircase, as you can see, or like a table. And these were just sort of undone only because I didn't have the gallery space to put them in. And I was literally just getting ideas out of me. But this is a table which I would title it. There are a couple other tables in storage, but I don't know if you can see. It's very finely crafted, like wood with a pyramid top. And I wanted to call this line of furniture, furniture that points to its home.
Amazing.
But anyway, so this is the first painting I've actually finished towards the show in Paris. I don't know if you can see, it's kind of dark in here.
Yeah, it looks great. It looks great. We talked about this a little bit, and we're thinking, kind of had this conversation about implied violence.
Yes. Well, this painting I was scrambling to finish because I thought I would put this in Nina's show until I just had a feeling that it doesn't quite fit. Like all the other paintings were already finished, and as I looked at them, I thought, nothing. Someone called me for a talk, an interview, and he said, he sees an implied violence in my work, and I thought, oh no, this is very overt. As you can see, there's some blood on the tip of the iron. Um, and I thought that was really interesting in trying to think about the work before and the subtlety of the violence, maybe that undercurrent versus like this, the blood in this painting. And I thought, oh, I wonder what's changing here. And I decided not to put this in the Miami show for that reason. And I've already planned a lot of the paintings for the upcoming show.
Oh, let's see. This is showing up as a little bit of a technical difficulty on my end. I'm not sure about everyone else. So we might try to, let's see. Can everyone else see Shannon right now, or is she frozen? Okay, you're back.
Oh, here I am. I was getting a phone call. I don't know how to stop that from happening.
It's fine. It's fine.
We're learning.
You're back.
So anyway, I had made a deck of cards, like these, this table and this staircase, this furniture. I had made a deck of cards, all of which were the losing card, Fooled Again. So it was a Fooled Again deck. And I thought, I don't know, I just brought it back into my painting world. And there are a couple things, to be honest, that I did in the past that I'm sort of planning to bring into this new way of painting, that I think maybe failed a little bit as in another mode of creating. Like I painted this fishbowl that's on a stove, and this showed in New York City at LaBeouf Gallery. And that originally, my friends know this already, but that originally was a project that I had actually a taxidermist create a goldfish for me about 10 years ago. And I was trying to literally create like a realistic looking fish on a stove. And I had these pieces in my studio just sitting there with no gallery prospect. And so that was the first painting that I made.
Shannon, what is this work? It's a little to the left of where you are, right there. What is that? To the right.
Painting right here. This just says butter. This was in a show in Chelsea, and I loved this painting for a long time. So I did paint pseudo realistically, but it's kind of floating in space.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about that one, but that's like, I don't know, 10 years old at this point.
Amazing.
And I can't believe no one bought it, only because it's that kind of situation where there were like 10 people and then no one came through. And I get it. I was kind of happy because I liked holding on to a kind of a memory of that time. But there's some of my like word pieces back there. So all my art, this was covered in paintings, this corner, and then they just went one by one to Nina. LA. So I finally have a little more room. It's a box of a studio, but
amazing.
Anyway,
amazing.
All that's going on right now. Those are paintings that are going to come out of me soon. Those blank canvases. That's all I got going right now. It's an empty studio.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this. I'm just going to scroll through the comments real quick and see if we have any particular questions. I think we sort of answered most of what people. Someone had asked about the Paris show, which for now is scheduled for the fall, but could change depending on how things are going. Again, there's a potential group show with soft opening that hopefully will happen. Our show will open as scheduled on April 3rd, at least in the digital world. Hopefully we'll be able to take appointments for people that want to come in individually and see the show. We're figuring out how to do that now. And we've already extended the closing date to May 15th. If we have to extend that again so that we can at least have a little bit of time open to the public, we will.
Well, Nina, you see the paintings now in person. People tell me like my art looks so realistic, whatever that means. But now that you see them in person, don't they come apart? Like,
totally. I think one of the things that was really wonderful for me to see them in the flesh versus just as images is the sort of oddity of the proportions. You know, I think when we see an image, like the piece that we're using for our press release, which is that great image of the woman kind of holding her own neck, you know, it looks accurately proportioned, but in the real world, what happens is a sort of distortion of her head where she's sort of the foreshortening is exaggerated. And that's true of the woman with the apple, which is the painting we were talking about earlier. And I'll kind of put that up here so that people can see it. You know, the camera does this funny thing and kind of corrects the proportional shift. I imagine that something similar happens with the hands. And certainly I've seen that with some of the other work. So I think, Shannon, for now, you know, I really want to thank everyone for joining us on here. And I do want to mention that your show is going to be opening alongside a show in our upstairs gallery of works by Elsa Hansen Oldham. And we'll be doing digital programming for Elsa as well. And you know, we'll have all the images up on our website by the end of next week. Whoever has emailed us asking for a catalog, we'll be sure to share that with them as well. And once the show is installed, probably the week after next, we'll schedule a digital walkthrough so that we can talk about the paintings in your actual show. There was one quick question that maybe we'll respond to, which was if you have any favorite surrealist writers. And once you answer that, we'll let everyone go and get back to what is hopefully working from home.
Writers. I wonder why surrealists specifically, but the only surrealist writer I can think of, like off the top of my head, maybe he's not surrealist per se, but Antonin Artaud I really love, and he's got that sort of mental thing going. Probably Borges. I don't know if he's considered surrealist. But I'm not necessarily. There was a book called Let's Murder the Moonshine. I thought that was an interesting surrealist book, but I haven't read that in like 25 years or something.
Let's Murder the Moonshine. I'm going to write that down. Everyone needs a little extra reading these days. So.
I did want to just say thank you, Nina. I'm so excited. Even though we haven't met in person, I think this is the future, and we're living in it, and it's pretty amazing. And I think the only reason I'm getting to have this show and we get to keep it on time is because of this sort of format, which I think is mind-blowing and amazing. But also I do know a few artists whose shows really got interfered with by this and are being really affected. And I know the whole world is being affected, but particularly in art, my heart goes out to those people whose shows were really, canceled, or maybe they're depending on this for like the launch of some, bigger part of their career or something. And this is really disappointing. And I feel really blessed and lucky that you're putting it out there. And also that I happen to make paintings and images that can be put on the internet easily. And I know a lot of art can't be.
Totally. Well, all the, certainly you're in Nashville, the whole music industry has been really seriously affected by this. Like you said, anything that's installation based or institutional has been enormously affected. And so we are so fortunate to be able to still connect to our audiences this way. And, hopefully everyone can do a little bit to help the people around them and closest to them. And, follow the order to stay put, and we'll all get through this sooner rather than later. And yeah, we'll be here for everyone in whatever way we can. So thank you, Shannon, for participating and doing your first Instagram Live.
Is it okay? Can I ask you, when is the walkthrough of the gallery show?
We have to schedule it. I think we'll we'll plan on doing it for the week after next. I want to make sure that our installation goes smoothly and everyone can do that. And then we'll get that, scheduled, and we'll post about it so everyone can follow us and follow you. And I also believe the New Art Dealers Alliance, NADA, will be sharing a video of this chat on their page as well.
Hey, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you, Shannon.
Bye.